Hey, everybody. Hi. Nice to see you. I'm Ryan Pierce. I'm the chair of the Low-Res MFA in Visual Studies here at PNCA. Welcome to our last event of a very busy summer session. This land where PNCA is located rests on the traditional village sites of the Multnomah, Cathlamet, Clackamas, Tualatin, Kalapuya, Molalla, bands of the Chinook, and many other tribes who made their homes along the Columbia River. As settlers and guests on these lands, we respect the work of Native nations, leaders, and families, and make ongoing efforts to center Indigenous knowledge, creativity, resilience, and resistance. If you're new to our community, or if not, I hope you'll spend some time with the Arrowhead Project, which is a long-term installation of a series of works by Indigenous artists addressing the history of this institution and the place it occupies, and you'll find that in the atrium of the 511 building here. I want to start with some big thanks to the PNCA community and also our non-PNCA community members for attending the last 7 weeks of events. Let's give some love to Danny in the booth. Thank you for holding us down with the AV support. This Visiting Artist Series is a joy to program, and it's a huge boon to the college, and we envision it as a contribution and conversation with our art community writ large, so please spread the word. And feel free to contact me in December. So, I love land, and I like art. Land art is a little more complicated. Land art to me is resonant of 1960s white New Yorkers gallivanting their way west and discovering vast empty spaces, asterisk on discovering, asterisk on empty. Deciding that the Great Basin, the Utah Salt Flats, or the high desert plateaus of New Mexico were akin to an empty canvas, a canvas stretched by geological magnificence, but void of notable cultural or ecological history. Never mind that some of these sites are proximate to the capitals of the ancient Puebloan world and were inhabited for centuries, or that they occupy terrain so ecologically sensitive that a single footprint can eradicate a half-century of cryptobiotic growth. Land art in the traditional sense is visionary in a way that Manifest Destiny is visionary. It's colonial, exploitative, and fixed in the past. Enter New Mexican artist Joanna Keane Lopez. Lopez's process and materials are drawn from deep knowledge of the land and its inhabitation. The palette of a high desert dwelling includes adobe and piñon pine, and Lopez wields traditional building materials in a way that, to me, both nods to and reclaims land art and minimalist tropes, and that embraces the real and unromanticized history of the Southwest, a zone of displacement, erasure, nuclear pollution, and yet a land of enchantment nonetheless. Joanna Keane Lopez has shown at Site Santa Fe, Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art, the San Jose Art Museum, the National Hispanic Cultural Center Art Museum, Akron Art Museum, Sarasota Art Museum, has been supported by the Jack K. and Gertrude Murphy Award, the Andy Warhol Foundation for the Arts, and the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation. Please join me in welcoming Joanna Keane Lopez.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. Happy to be here. I'll just go ahead and jump in. A huge portion of my practice is inspired by my family's land in Socorro, New Mexico, which is the ancestral Puebloan land of the Puro. And on there, we have an old land grant from 1815, and there's a slew of different buildings on the family land, and the oldest ones are the adobe buildings that were built by my great-great-grandparents. This is one of them, and as time went on, you could see that there would be a furthering away from this land-based architectural building style that would become later on adobe and cinder block, or then frame and stucco, and then later on there'd be trailers. And so you can kind of see this as time went on. And one thing I really loved about it was the vernacular element of these houses, whereas literally the dirt from the yard, my father did this in the 70s, where he put a bunch of river rocks over the adobe walls, or literally the vigas are from the mountains, the nearby mountains. So the property is colloquially known as Lopezville. So I became really interested in my family's land in this way because of just the simplicity of the materials and the vernacular nature of it, including the way of like beautifying the interior, especially through different types of paints, such as this calcimine paint that you see here. It's like a chalky type of paint, or even putting wallpaper directly onto the adobe walls, as well as you can see this blue fabric that is a manta would hang underneath the vigas, which was basically there because the original roof was an earthen roof, so dirt would fall and the fabric would catch the dirt. And my family painted it blue. And so just these like details that were within this really simple mud house that included earth, paper, wood, and fabric. So I became really interested in that, and also these different types of ways of painting adobe. From there, I became really interested in just the surrounding communities and of New Mexico. I'm originally from Albuquerque, New Mexico. My family's from Socorro. My mom is actually from Detroit and spent over 50 years in New Mexico. And so as I began to continue my relationship with learning about adobe architecture, I began to do volunteering. This is one example at the San Francisco de Assisi Church in Taos, New Mexico, where every year the community comes together and re-mud plasters the church. Also learned in my early 20s from women in northern New Mexico about Alice, a clay slip paint for painting the adobe walls, which is actually just like a type of clay that you can find on the side of the roads. From there, I began to also do restoration and preservation work with old adobe houses. This one's in southern Colorado. And all of this began to really form my understanding around adobe architecture beyond my own family to my community, from New Mexico to southern Colorado. From here, I started doing my own workshops. This probably began in my early 20s. I'm 33 now. And I started doing my own workshops around this time. This is one from over in Los Angeles with Tracy Phoenix. That was this wonderful exhibition about land-based practices. This is with Site Santa Fe, a show I did, but then working with the high school students to do like an outreach project. And then around that time, I also started to teach workshops with a friend of mine, Helen Levine, who is the co-owner of New Mexico Earth. Adobe is their Adobe manufacturing yard in the North Valley of Albuquerque, and her father began it in the 70s. And we actually started to, around COVID, start to teach these weekend workshops on introduction to Adobe architecture and mud plastering. And it's been this really wonderful experience of having people come around nationally and locally to work with us, me as an artist, and then her as someone who's been working on an Adobe yard, making Adobes for the last 50 years. So it's been a really wonderful experience as a collaboration with her, as well as like an element of my practice for working with others. Another project that I really love as far as a workshop is Adobe. This one is called a series called Adobe Architecture as a Heritage Practice. Taught this one with architect designer Ronald Rael at an old farmhouse from the early 1900s in northern New Mexico. We're actually going to be doing another one this weekend. And it was really beautiful because people wrote in about their relationship with Adobe architecture and how, based off of their family, how they related to it. So it wasn't just kind coming and making adobes or doing mud plastering, but also sharing stories and really connecting as like a group and creating community. And so that was really special and something that I'm looking forward to continuing on. And this is that adobe art that I was talking about, New Mexico Earth, and this is where we host some of those workshops. So just kind of give an idea of where I'm coming from and how I've learned and how I've been teaching, but I'm also continuing to learn. And how I first began doing a lot of these adobes is actually I started buying these from Helen, from this yard, and started making these larger installations. And that's how I kind of got started, actually, was doing large-scale works. This one in particular was for the Sarasota Art Museum, but I began with New Mexico art in public places when I first got started doing exterior, a couple exterior works. And this one was a project called Resolana in New Mexico. There's this concept of this sunny side of a wall called Resolana, where people come together and create community or storytelling and connecting. And so to kind of create that concept of Resolana within this installation, I hosted this performance to sort of activate or create the sense of Resolana with artists Guadalupe Maravilla and Monique Carr, that brought together poetry and storytelling and dance and like childhood games. And so it was really special to sort of bring that into like performance and sculpture and this architecture. And this is another installation where this was at Site Santa Fe, where I invited others to come and actually learn with me as we built the installation together over 2 days. And so it ended up becoming this installation that was about architecture and sculpture and painting, and also that Elise that I mentioned, that clay slip paint. So those are all different types of clays that are painted, but also something that was really something that was also about learning. This was actually, that show was a 2-part show, Landcraft Theater. So this part was about the land, and then this part was more about sky and paper and natural dyes made with baling wire. And there's another one that was from my honors thesis when I graduated from the University of New Mexico. And this is actually the first time I even worked with adobes ever, and Elise, that clay slip paint. So you can see the clay, the white clay is actually over paper mache. And that's actually something that I gathered. So that was when I first got started. And I would continue doing some of this paperwork, but it's really hard on my hands. So I prefer this one. And here's some images of the process of the enjarrando, the mud plastering, and the laying of the adobes. Here's another project from San Antonio that was about a color laboratory. So all of these are different types of colors of clays, except for the blue. But the yellow is from Colorado. The pink is from, I think, like northern Mexico, a friend of mine gave me. The green is from Terlingua in Texas, West Texas. And the white is from northern New Mexico. And it was sort of like a laboratory within the gallery space. So you can have, I brought different tools that are there, as well as sort of a map showing different where the other clays went and Polaroids. So sort of to give more of a sense of the process. Another installation in Sarasota for the process. This one was actually a continuation of that concept of the Resolana. So I also hosted performances with this. So it was like a traveling exhibition where every time I used the same adobe bricks and then built it anew each time in a different way. And it traveled from three different institutions. And again, all Elise clay slip. From there, I have been working on these new series. I was working a lot with these large-scale works, and I wanted to figure out how I could make it more, move them around, but also kind of bring together that original concept I brought to you of the the elemental materials of adobe, wood, paper, and fabric from what I was talking about with my great-grandfather. So this work is called Ghost Spell, and it is about that house that I showed you earlier, trying to take those elemental materials and put them together as a prayer and as like an installation to try and explore architecture. And so it's a photograph that I took of the landscape in the area that then is paper that I put on to kind of create that wallpaper element. And this is another work kind of along that same lines of thinking about architecture and taking it down to its most simple elements into installation. And it's called The Love of Chamizal. My family's on Lopezville. Before it was called Lopezville, was Chamizal, before the U.S.-American acquisition of the region, and then it became anglicized into Lopezville. And so I was thinking about place names, and of course it had a different name when it was the Puro Pueblo before that. But again, thinking about fabric, the vigas, wood, earth, and then the yellow is actually another type of clay, that Elise that I mentioned. So from here, I'm going to go ahead and start talking more about nuclear landscapes within my work. This is me standing on Lopezville in Socorro, and behind me you can see the M Mountain. This is my great-grandparents in front of the house, the little house that I have now. And so I want you to notice this mountain, and then notice this mountain right here. So our neighbors to Lopezville is the Energetic Materials Research and Testing Center, and they are a research division of New Mexico Tech and perform testing of high explosive bombs and other munitions for the government and private entities. And so growing up, my father said that he would hear these bombs going off and it would be so loud that it would crack the adobe walls of his grandfather's home. And even when I'm there, I can hear the bombs going off because it's literally the neighbors that are doing this, and they're a part of New Mexico Tech. And this is something that I have been really interested in, specifically because my father is also an activist against depleted uranium, because they actually used to do depleted uranium testing in the 70s and open air testing. And I'm not sure what exactly they do nowadays, but I'll just go ahead and show you the proximity of the little red dot there of Lopezville Road, off of Lopezville Road, and then the EMRTC and how close that is, and also to give you an understanding. And so just thinking about the proximity of domestic space and civilian space and how close these type of testing is taking place. An early installation I did to kind of try and work out some of these thoughts about this was installation at 516 Arts that was all about archive. It was called Lopezville, Socorro, New Mexico, where I literally took some of that dirt from Lopezville and then made it into adobes, and then also had different types of documents, archival documents on the wall, including natural plants from the area, and also that manta, that fabric that I mentioned, the blue one right there from the wall. And while I made these adobes, inside of the dirt were so many liquor bottle shards. And so I started thinking a lot about memory and land, and there was multiple generations of alcoholism within my family that you could literally find in the land. Along with these documents that my father lent me of radioactive material license from New Mexico Tech in 1971 of using depleted uranium as ordnance and ballistic investigations right there in Socorro Mountain. And so thinking again of like memory and land and so much that we don't realize can be there that can sometimes only be found through archive. So again, this was some hediondia, this creosote plant that grows all in that area, and it actually is really interesting that it grows everywhere because it actually cleanses the body of toxins. So it was just something I wanted to sort of bring into the installation as well. So moving forward, another element in New Mexico that you may be familiar with is the Trinity test that took place in 1945, approximately 35 miles from Socorro. And my father, Damasio, at the time was 2 years old when this took place, and this map shows the fallout that is understood of where the wind went, although people always say the New Mexico wind goes all over the place at the time. And while I was doing this research, I was thinking a lot about my grandfather's house and the cracking of the walls during these bombs. And it turns out that 2 days before they detonated the Trinity and before they bombed Japan, they assembled the plutonium core of the gadget, this bomb, in the bedroom of this adobe ranch house. And so I started really thinking about, like, what does this mean for the government to literally take this ranch house by eminent domain and then assemble a nuclear bomb in the bedroom, and that line of domestic civilian space being invaded by the US military complex. And so that was something I've been really considering, like whether or not, uranium mining, such as on the Navajo Nation, it's in their ancestral land, or at Lopezville, like our neighbors are using this type of bombing, or literally taking someone's home and assembling this bomb. So this gives a context of White Sands Missile Range in New Mexico. It is the largest testing range in the US. And you can see all of these little dots right here are all different houses that were there before it was taken and used by the US government for testing. And some of these ranch houses are actually still used. My family are still ranchers out there, and they actually lease the ranches from White Sands Missile Range. And then when White Sands is going to do bombing or testing, they have to leave and get motels in Socorro. And so there's still this relationship with the ranchers and this missile range, which is really interesting. And where they did the Trinity site, or the Trinity test, there is now this obelisk there that is, the facade is decorated with the black lava rock that you actually see all in the Malpais area. So another thought of like vernacular material being used for something like this as a memorial obelisk site. So thinking about all this research, I went out there to the house, I went out there to the site, doing research also with the Tularosa Downwinder Consortium. I made this installation talking about this bedroom of the McDonald House. That's what it's called, the McDonald House, if you look it up online. And this was the first iteration that I did, and it was literally thinking about that story, but telling it through craft and traditional practices of architecture and furniture making and embroidery, and also with the creosote plants. So this work, I had an initial one that I just showed you, and then this is the newest work over at Site Santa Fe for the Site Santa Fe International that just came out. And the installation's really trying to tell that story of that bedroom through domestic space, through intimate space, through craft and traditional practice. And so you can see the embroidery is a colcha embroidery, which is like a very old Spanish type of colcha, or Spanish embroidery in New Mexico. It's a couching stitch, but it is of that map that I showed earlier of the fallout area, and the blue is the Rio Grande. As well as motifs from the house as well, the red flowers. And it's interesting that Oppenheimer chose to call it the Trinity, so I included the Trinity on the bottom and also the obelisk. And so, yeah, this work is really important to me, specifically because in a bedroom, it's supposed to be a place of peace and where you sleep and you feel safe, and where sometimes you could be born or you make love. And instead, it was the site of where literally the atomic age more or less began. The site where they did the bomb is about 2 miles away. So this is a project about that, and I also want to say that just last week was the 80th anniversary of the Trinity. So it's been 80 years, and New Mexico downwinders have been uncompensated until literally just last week as well, with the new bill that was just passed. And so it took about 80 years for people to be compensated for these radiogenic cancers that have impacted communities in the area. And if you want to learn more about this, watch First We Bombed New Mexico by Louis Lipman, or look up the Tularosa Basin Downwinder Consortium. I'm actually on the steering committee now. Tina Cordova runs that, and they do incredible work. So go ahead and move forward, and let's see. So another project that I've been working on exploring this history of the Trinity specifically is this series called Thrice Layered. And it is on these hand-cast adobe works that I am using archival documents, such as this one is a hand-drawing diagram of an eyewitness account of the Trinity by L.W. Albuquerque in 1945. So he saw this happen and made this drawing. And so what I went ahead and did is actually go to the Trinity site on that site visit that I mentioned, and I like to do photography as well, and so I took photos of the architecture of the McDonald House and of the landscape, and then worked with these archival documents. So here's another one that is taking the White Sands Missile Range map, and then the architectural plan of the McDonald House, and then using the photography that I went out there during these site visits. And one thing I kind of was interested in this is when you're out there, it looks so beautiful. Like nothing necessarily looks wrong when you're out there. I mean, there's a lot of abandoned buildings, but then there's this insidious history that is there. And I think that's why like signage is so important. And luckily, I was just there last week, but the downwinders finally were able to get a sign by the Stallion Gate of the White Sands telling the story of what has happened to the downwinders. So it took 80 years for there to be a sign being like, this has impacted these communities. Because otherwise, like, how do people know unless you're in the know, you know, or have educated yourself? And so I wanted these to also be beautiful, but also have that kind of speak to these underlying histories that are present in the landscape. So in these, you can see, let's see, here's another one. So I brought in, there's like photographs of the wallpaper of the McDonald House, or there's photographs of the volcanic rock of that obelisk, or my hand holding some of the trinitite. When the bomb went off, it mixed with the sand and the plutonium, and it created all this green glass by the site 0. And it's the only type of trinitite only exists in that one area. As well as archival documents of like the blast site as well. So here's another one, the fallout zone from the Trinity that really impacted. Specifically, Carizoso was really impacted, Bingham, the Chupadera Mesa that, and Tularosa really significantly. So here's another one from that series. And again, just really trying to capture these moments of the landscape and the architecture to try and tell these stories through archive. And here is Another image of the glass on the floor, or even the doorknob, the color of the doorknob. So really subtle. And I also do the colcha embroideries. This was just a little study alongside the prints on adobe. And the prints are made with a UV acrylic inkjet print. So I'll go ahead. There's quite a few recent projects I just did, and so I'll just run through them. They are a little different from what I was just saying. So this was a project just recently. So I focus a lot also, of course, on architecture and craft. So the mashrabia, it's kind of a turn, is a architectural motif in the Middle East that traveled with the Spanish to New Mexico. And so here are some images of the mashrabia in New Mexico, these wooden grates, that are really interesting to me to think about how architecture can travel from different countries and cultures, and then also mix with like a Middle Eastern, Spanish, and indigenous designs that make up a lot of the architecture that goes with adobe in New Mexico specifically. And so this is an installation I made just recently in Berkeley that was exploring the mashrabia, and also, again, like the simplicity of materials of fabric and stone, such as like a stone foundation and adobe mud. And the fabric is actually sabanilla, which is made out of churro wool. And so this was just sort of like a experiment in material, and also thinking about that history of migration architecturally. Let's see here. This is also another project I just did. This is over at the San Jose Art Museum that just went up, and this is just the digital design. But basically I went around northern New Mexico, Northern California, and there's a lot. I've been living up there in Northern California. I'm actually been in residency at the Headland Center for the Arts for the last year. And it's been really wonderful, and I've been really curious about the history of New Mexico, of adobe architecture in New Mexico, and how that is also present in California because of Spanish colonization. And so I went on a road trip to all these different sites. I'll go ahead and play this. So I went on a road trip from north of Marin all the way down to Monterey, looking at these different adobe sites. And it was really interesting to do this research because specifically in New Mexico, when the Spanish came to New Mexico, the indigenous Puebloan communities were already working with mud. Like that is the material, that is the vernacular material in the area. And so the two technologies of Spanish bringing it and the indigenous already kind of melded together. Whereas in Northern California, the indigenous culture people up there were actually working with fiber for their houses. And so when the Spanish came with mission architecture, it was forced indigenous labor to build these big missions in Northern California, and it was not the same history as in New Mexico. So very different. Here's another one. And so yeah, it was a really, I was trying to talk about that in these videos, but also trying to really show the materiality of the land and how that is also being seen in the architecture as well. And so these are on these 2 6x6 foot hand cast adobe works with ponderosa pine that are again painted with a type of clay. Yeah, I'll go ahead and let that go for a bit. And so just these moments that I was trying to capture, and in each video too, the sound's not on right now, but each of them kind of captures these different sounds of the birds in each region, or the sound of the water, or like each place has such a different sound to it, and light, and it was really beautiful. It was the first time I've actually done video work. And I guess going on that, I will say one thing I think is really important for my practice is I don't just stay in in a room, in a square room. Like, I really enjoy going out and being in the community, or being in landscape, or being in conversation. And that's really where a huge part of where my practice lies. So this is a project I just did. It's called Tierra, Lumbre, Leña. And it is, again, based off of archive. I just opened this last weekend, and I have been working on it all spring. So I have been researching this really special archive that is held by the Earth Builders Guild. And it's this incredible archive it's basically adobe architecture in New Mexico from the 1970s to the 1990s that was originally collected by New Mexico Tech, that same college next door to my family's land. So some researchers in the geology department were going around New Mexico and doing tests on dirt. But at the same time, they put together this huge exhaustive archive of adobe architecture. It's amazing. And it was donated to the Earth Builders Guild. It's been sitting in these folders that I've been working with Earth Builders Guild to go ahead and digitize their slides and film photographs. And it's been this really wonderful process. And so within it, there are so many different subjects. Some of them are all about adobe yards. Some of them are like a project on putting adobe veneers on trailers in Tesuque, or one is all about a prison program for prisoners to build adobe corrals for wild horses that happened in the 80s. And quite a few were on these hornos, these mud ovens, and earthen fireplaces, fogones. So I decided to focus this exhibition specifically on these archival earthen fireplaces and hornos. So again, these works are on hand-cast adobe works, framed in maple, and then used with a collage archival material of the slides and film photos. And they're all from different Indo-Hispano communities, such as La Ciénaga in northern New Mexico. And it's really special because these aren't really made that much anymore. They're not as commonly made. And another thing about La Ciénaga has happened is there's been a huge PFAS contamination that's taken place because of a military site there, and they were using firefighter foam or something. And so there's a major contamination of water in this particular community that holds these beautiful remnants of, or examples of adobe fireplaces, and it's just incredible. So along with that, I did colored pencil drawings of these archives. This is one of my colored pencil drawings that is then printed directly onto the adobe surface. And again, this one is in La Ciénaga. And just really beautiful foodways of working with earth and land and stone and wood, and also with and eating, and gathering in people. So here's another one of the colored pencil drawings that's based off of the archives. And I really love this one because there's the little altar of the Virgen right there alongside the horno. And sort of like there's just like a really beautiful conversation there that I think is very special. And this is definitely something I'm excited to push further with my photography practice and my practice with working with adobe as a craft tradition. Here's another one of the drawings. Have any of you ever eaten anything out of an horno? Yeah? It tastes good, huh? It's different. So here are some of those images. And it was nice to do it in this gallery particularly because they literally had these adobe fireplaces throughout the entire gallery, which was not purposeful at all, but it ended up being like that. And so you can definitely see that my work is pretty diverse. I stick pretty firmly to adobe architecture, but there's just so many ways to explore so many different topics within, and especially through archive and site visits, and really just getting to know people and sharing stories is a huge backbone to my work. Yeah, so here's a couple more. And I'm hoping during the extent of this show that we can actually build an horno at some point. I'm hoping maybe next month as a part of it and have different people come out and help make it. So we're going to work on that together. Yeah, so I think a really lovely relationship, right, between the works and then the actual architecture of the space. And that wraps up my talk. These are some upcoming shows that I have coming up. And so especially the Unearthing Futures one at the Harwood Art Museum is going to be really amazing. That one is specifically of artists internationally who work with adobe architecture. And so it's going to be a really wonderful group of artists for that show. So if that's your thing, definitely keep an eye out for that. And thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much. And we have time for audience questions. We're using a microphone because we have a streaming audience as well. And so if you have a question, I will bring you the mic and you can ask it into the mic.
Thank you, Joanna. That was really very interesting and really lovely to see your work. Thank you for sharing that. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the part of your practice that involves the research. You talk about archives and site visits, and I'm just wondering, I guess I don't have a fully formed question around it, but it kind of goes like, how do you do your research? How do you choose what elements of your research to make into pieces? And is there part of the research that joins to the next, like does one show or one element of your research lead to the next? Or yeah, how is research informing your work?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I really think about art as visual research, is how I've been thinking about it. And for instance, for that Harwood show I just mentioned, I'm right now putting together the proposal of what I want to do, and my friend Helen, who has the yard, this is getting into your question, she mentioned at one point that there were people coming who were buying the adobe bricks, and then they were using them at Kirtland Air Force Base in Albuquerque to build adobe simulation buildings of adobe to simulate architecture in the Middle East, and then doing potentially ballistic testing or different types of tests. And I have a cousin who works for White Sands and is a miner, and he said he also built some of those for White Sands that are these ballistic simulation walls. And so just literally talking to people that, you learn so much. And so now I'm really interested in continuing to think about earthen architecture and how the government's using that for testing and with energetic materials is what they call it. And so hopefully what I would like to do is try and figure out some type of research and site visits as far as I can potentially get for this upcoming exhibition. And so I'm just going to have to, figure out how that works, and potentially, I don't know, with the government, I don't know how that will go, but I think it's a lot about paying attention and listening and following up, and there's so much that's not actually on the internet, like such as this archive. This one in particular, it's not on the internet, not yet. We will get it on the internet on some database at some point soon, but I think that's really important to realize, different ways of research that's not on a computer. Yeah.
Hi, Joanna. Thank you very much for your talk. I was curious, you were talking about how Adobe was brought to Northern California because of colonization. And it also seems like a sort of a living building, like you have to maintain it and kind of keep it going. So I was curious if there were different sort of struggles with keeping the Adobe in California alive and like working because of the difference in climate.
Yeah, that's a really great question. It's important to have an overhang for the most part. And if you don't, then you definitely do need to keep up on reed mud plastering. And depending on how much clay is in your mud plaster is how long it will last with the elements. And so when I did my research for that project, there were quite a bit that were just completely dilapidated. I think let me see if I can show this one. There's one, I wonder if it's this one. Oh, no, wait, it's this one. There was one that they literally built like a building around the old Adobe house because it had completely fallen apart on this Olampali State Park. And then some were kept up as these like museum houses. And so, yeah, Adobe is definitely a material of relationship and reciprocal care to take care of it. Yeah.
Was it obvious to you, Joanna, that contemporary art was the right lane for this work the entire time, or did you think about becoming a working architect? Do you still consider that?
I actually did apply to architecture school for my master's. Yeah, I almost considered going to Berkeley or Cranbrook for those. They had like an MFA in architecture, but then I realized I didn't really want to sit behind a computer and like design an airport or something. And I feel like art really allows you to show things in a way that's not so regimented that I think architecture can be. So I'm happy, but I would be interested to do some definitely build my own place or do a larger build of an Adobe house at some point soon. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for the amazing talk. I had a question about the Adobe fireplace works that you were showing. I just want to make sure I heard you correctly. They're colored pencil drawings that you're printing onto Adobe. And if you could speak a little bit more about that process, I'm really curious.
Yeah, absolutely. So some of them are colored pencil drawings that I've done of the archives. Some of them are a collage of the slides that are then printed onto an Adobe surface using UV cured acrylic inkjet print. Yeah, and I've been working with Magnolia Editions. They're a wonderful print studio. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just said that as slowly as I could. Great.
Going once. Thank you, Joanna
Thank you
Keane
so
Lopez.
much. Yeah.